welcome back, everybody, to another episode of the Junkyard Dawgcast. I'm your host, Jordan Hill. Got Kipp Adams and Ben Wolk with me today, and we are going to give out some superlatives, mid-season superlatives. Usually our second episode of the week we spend with a beat writer from whatever team Georgia is playing that Saturday. Georgia has a bye week, so we decided, look, they've played 7 games this season. It's a good chance to do some mid-season superlatives, hand out some awards, and give our thoughts on what we've seen from Georgia to this point in the season. Georgia 6-1 at this point, some big games left, and some fun plays and fun moments to look back on in what was essentially the first half of the season. And I'm going to start it, guys. Our first award, we're just going to use one word to describe the first 7 games for the Georgia Bulldogs. So, Ben, I'm going to put you on the spot. Give me one word to describe Georgia 6-1 at this point, what their season has looked like so far.
One word to describe. Just a preface for everybody listening to this. Jordan knows all these superlatives and has put Kipp and I on the spot here, and is now making me use the depths of my vocabulary to describe what's been a ridiculous season. Unpredictable. I think. Am I supposed to explain my one word, or am I just supposed to say one word and we move on? All right. I'm going to say unpredictable in that the way that Georgia has found ways to win this season is not typically the ways that I would have expected Georgia to be able to find ways to win this season. Where Georgia has been struggling in games this season, getting stops on third down, getting off the field defensively, having any kind of success with game plans in the first half. Not reasons that I typically point to a Georgia team and say, these are your issues. If you had told me at the beginning of the season that Tennessee had scored 41 and Ole Miss had scored 35, and this is Gunnar Stockton's first year starting, I would not have predicted that he was going to be the guy that goes out and has heroic performances to be able to win you those, top of the SEC type of games. So, while the end result, we're sitting here and the record that Georgia has might have been predictable, I think the way that Georgia got to this point was a pretty unpredictable football season up to this point.
Kipp, what you got? One word to describe Georgia through 7 games this year.
Hibernating. It's a team that refuses to wake up early in football games, and how long they can get away with that remains to be seen. They've already not been able to get away with it once, and I think there are some similarities to last season where we go throughout the season saying, well, if they don't fix this, it's going to catch up to them. And I think, now we're a little bit over halfway the season, and we've seen them time and time again having to make halftime adjustments to come back and win football games. And we say over and over again, well, they can't keep getting away with this. And I think that holds true, that if we're talking about a team trying to not just get to Atlanta, but I think ultimately win college football playoff games in this 12-team playoff, you're going to have to be able to play 4 quarters of football. And, yeah, you can look back. You mentioned on the last pod about the Ohio State game. That's still a field goal miss away from being a very different outcome. The Tennessee game, still field goal miss from being a very different outcome. So I just think that, again, they're playing with fire at this point, and the bye week gives them that opportunity to see, is this something we can actually fix, or are we just gonna be who we are for the rest of the season? And I think if that's going to be who they are the rest of the season, they should probably change their expectations a little bit.
My word is relentless. And part of that is you can be relentless and not be playing perfect football. And I think that that's a good characterization of what Georgia's done so far. Offense has been pretty good. There's been games where they've kind of sputtered. I think about the trip to Auburn. It took them a while to get going. But both sides of the ball just don't let up. And they have gotten themselves in situations where sitting there watching them, we've brought it up before on the podcast. We play the Palmer Tom's memorial game of does Georgia win this game with where we are. And there's been times that our answer has been no. I think probably the Tennessee game, I think we're like, they're just not going to win this game. And they just are relentless. They find ways to stay in games. They don't let bad breaks or bad possessions or mistakes wind up, totally derailing their opportunity. Obviously, the Alabama game is a loss, but they closed the gap in the second half and had their opportunities. So relentless is the word I'm going with. I think that's a good description of Georgia to this point. All right, we're going to talk about some individuals now, and some of these I think we're going to be on the same page as far as our choices, but some of the others really interested to see who you guys pick. So going to start offensive MVP for the first half of Georgia's season. Kipp, I'll set you up. Who is your offensive MVP?
My goodness. I think there's probably 3 guys you could go with overall for this. At the end of the day, it's so hard not to give it to Gunnar Stockton because, again, I know the quarterback, that it's teams live and die by their quarterback play. So more often than not, your MVP is going to be your quarterback. And I think that was the biggest question mark coming into the season. You saw him kind of up and down performances against 2 very good teams last year in Texas and Notre Dame. So who is Gunnar Stockton at quarterback? And then, every single time this season when Georgia needed someone to step up, though, it was Gunnar Stockton that was in there making plays and never, getting 2 up or 2 down. His personality backs that up. But I just think that so far, especially as of late, his play has been impressive. And I think if anyone would have said, hey, he's going to be completing over 70% of his passes, technically he's got 2 turnovers, but only 1 interception. And the fact that he's on pace to run for over 500 yards and, 12 to 15 touchdowns, I just think that he has probably surpassed most expectations that we had going into the season at this point. I don't know where the numbers are. We'll have to pull up those preseason projections. But I think, again, the promise of this team going into the second half is the fact that Gunnar Stockton is giving them very high-level quarterback play right now.
I'm also going with Gunnar. 70.5 completion percentage, 1,553 yards, 10 touchdowns, 1 interception. He's also rushed for 270 yards and 7 touchdowns. Fantastic performance in Week 3 at Tennessee, coming off of just an outstanding game against Ole Miss, probably his best game to date. There's been some ups and downs, which I think everyone should have reasonably expected coming into this season, a first-time starting quarterback. But I think there's no doubt that Gunnar has put Georgia in a position to be in this playoff race, and they bounced back from the loss to Alabama and have taken care of business. So I'm picking Gunnar Stockton as well. Ben, are you staying with us, or are you going to pick someone else for offensive MVP?
Not to make it boring, but I don't know. There's been other impact players on this offense, but I think that you have to go with Gunnar Stockton. I mean, when you think about, the knock on Georgia quarterbacks in the past and why they didn't get their flowers was always, well, the defense is, so good and they've got so many elite players around them or whatever. And I don't think you can have that same conversation about this Georgia team right now when you're talking about Gunnar Stockton in the quarterback position. I mean, again, I don't know that another quarterback wins the Tennessee game, the Auburn game, and the Ole Miss game, or any of them, let alone all 3 of them. It was pretty miraculous what I feel like he's done in moments when you had to have it. I mean, we are him hitting London Humphreys. I got to give a little credit to Josh McCray there because I think he had the game-changing moment in the Ole Miss game, but just Gunnar hitting some big time throws, making some big time runs in both the Ole Miss and Auburn game away from Georgia's season being in a real nightmare scenario right now. And so Georgia's 6-1, and I think that Gunnar Stockton is the reason why offensively.
To me, the only other case I would hear at this point, Colby Young, who is now hurt, I think he's got a good case. And I would hear out Zachariah Branch, but I'm pretty happy with who we went with.
I'd probably listen to Chauncey Bowen's conversation as well, just because of him stepping up in some key moments.
And I think Chauncey's name is probably going to come up here in a few minutes. All right, fascinated to see who you guys pick here. Defensive MVP. I'll start with you, Ben. Who are you picking for the defensive MVP?
I'm going to go with C.J. Allen, and the reason why is because I think that this single most important individual effort in any game that Georgia has had this season was C.J. Allen against Auburn. I think it's hard to be overly impressed with anybody on that defensive side. Like there's probably a case to be made for some guys that we're just not talking about. And if we're not talking about you on defense right now, that's probably a good sign. So like there's guys like KJ Bolden that like we just haven't talked about this year. And it's because you're not really ever concerned about what KJ Bolden is doing in his individual role on something. But I got to give it to CJ Allen just because he is the leader of that defense. Like he is the signal caller. And because of what he did in that Auburn game specifically, I also really like the clip. If y'all saw it, that Georgia posted when they were doing their victory highlights of Nate Frazier after Georgia scores the touchdown, down 9, scores the touchdown. I think it was the Nate Frazier screen. He comes by and he goes straight up to CJ Allen and he's like, we need you, or something to that effect. And clearly when you're an offensive player and you're beelining it straight for CJ Allen, trying to send a message like, hey, we need the defense to step up here, there's a certain leadership aspect that CJ Allen has had on this defense that I think will be important moving forward.
Ben, he was my pick as well, and I think some of the justification is that his play has kind of summed up this Georgia defense. There are times where he's played fantastic. He had a really good game against Auburn, and at other times he's kind of been picked on. His coverage skills are lacking. I thought Ole Miss got after him some on Saturday, but to his credit, late in that game, C.J. Allen was making plays. So he has done a very good job, I think, given the circumstances. Defense is up and down. I think you made a good point about some of the guys we haven't talked about. KJ Bolden, I think Dalen Everett's made some plays. But this defense is one where there's just not one shining star. But I think CJ has done his part to try to help on a defense that we know very well has a lot to clean up. All right, Kipp, are you sticking with us with CJ Allen, or do you got someone else for defensive MVP?
No, I got CJ Allen too. I think it's funny because you mentioned that Ole Miss game. I mean, they actually had him out for some time in that game just because of Ole Miss taking advantage. But I also think that, I mean, there's some criticism to be had for the defensive line play. The fact that usually your linebackers are, the whole point of the Georgia scheme is to free up these guys. It's why Glenn Schumann's had, Buckus Award winners basically every other year, is because of the defensive front. He's playing through a lot more traffic than a lot of the other guys, and still – in each of the games that have kind of, come down to the wire, he's had double-digit tackles against Tennessee, against Auburn, against Ole Miss. And so as far as the guy in this defense that's made the most, like, game-changing plays, obviously the Auburn play, I think it has to be C.J. Allen. And it's been across the board for him. And that's been, the first couple of years people talked about, he's kind of getting empty stats. And I don't think that's the case this season. He is making plays that alter the course of the football game. And I think that's kind of what you look for in a Georgia linebacker in that year 3 season, is when they kind of take that next step and start altering football games. And there are some, he's not going to be mistaken for Roquan Smith out there. But I mean, goodness. Yeah, he could be Amani Rice out there, and I think that's where he's kind of stepped up and getting to the football quicker, is because he's breaking down plays faster and putting himself in position to make big plays. And yeah, that might be Georgia's defense with CJ Allen, maybe a lower ceiling, but again, across the board, I think he's been the best so far this year.
C.J. Allen with 56 tackles, 5.5 tackles for loss, 3 sacks through 7 games. So he has been pretty productive statistically to this point. Special teams MVP. I'll start this one. I feel like it's kind of hard to figure out where you want to go with this one, but I'm going to give it to Brett Thorson. He winds up coming back from injury a little bit earlier than we expected. Week 2 against Austin Peay. 47.5 yards per punt to this point. He's done a great job of flipping fields. He had a fantastic punt. I think that was the Kentucky game that winds up getting down on like the 1 or the 2. Might be a little controversial since he was not needed at all for the Ole Miss game, but I think he's done a very good job. Since coming back from injury, there were big questions, especially when you have Drew Miller that you could turn to if it was taking Brett a little while to come back. But I think he's done a good job, and he's been really good at flipping fields so far this season. Kipp, who do you have for the special teams MVP?
I think it's crazy that how many punts did Drew Miller have in the season opener? Because, yeah, I mean, my pick is Brett Thorson as well, just because he's flipping fields. He's picked up right back where he left off last season as far as getting Georgia into basically the top 10 in net punting, ensuring there's no return, consistently just, putting him in great position. He had that another outstanding coughing kick punt that was ridiculous. But I think, yeah, again, he's got 15 punts in the year, and I think Drew Miller had like 5 or 6 in that first game. So he's out of the mix for a lot of the national like counting stats because he doesn't hit the minimum. So, but credit to him coming back from injury. We didn't really know what he was going to bring to the table, but if he's not 100%, it's even more impressive because it looks like it's the same Brett Thorson out there, and he's basically gotten better every year he's been at Georgia.
Drew Miller had 6 punts against Marshall, which I did not realize it was quite that many. And they've at least settled in on offense, so Brett's workload has not been quite as high. Ben, who you going with for special teams MVP?
Well, as much as I want to give it to Gunnar Stockton for saving the field goal attempt against Ole Miss, I'm going to go with Peyton Woodring. I continue to say I think he's one of the most taken for granted football players Georgia's ever had, and I get he misses a field goal against Auburn. So that's a little bit fresher in our minds because we don't see Peyton Woodring miss many field goals, but this guy's 9 for 10 this season. He's made all 27 of his extra points. He's never missed an extra point the entire time he's been at Georgia, which again is something that you only take for granted when you've got a guy that's never missed an extra point the entire time that he's been there. All of a sudden you have a guy that misses a few and you're like, oh man, I forgot how nice it is. I mean, you look at these games, he has a 51-yarder against Ole Miss in a game where you needed every point you had. He had a 53-yarder against Auburn in a game where you needed every point that you had. He had a 48-yarder against Tennessee in a game where you needed every point that you had in a game that an opposing kicker missed a shorter field goal than that. So again, I realize he had 2 kicks out of bounds last week. I get it. Ole Miss was scoring those touchdowns, whether it was a 75-yard drive or a 65-yard drive. So I don't hold that too much against Peyton Woodring. I just think, we need to start having a conversation, I think, about how great this kicker is in the history of Georgia kickers. I don't know that you're getting a more consistent nails from distance in clutch spots kicker than Peyton Woodring. And I just assume he's going to make it every time. I know that that's going to make you look silly when you're the guy that says, oh, I think this guy's going to make it every time. And then he goes and misses one against Auburn in the key spot. But that's part of field goal kicking. You're not going to make every single one of them. And he doesn't miss easy kicks. That's really what it comes down to.
You could make the argument he was helping the defense out and defensive stats, making sure they weren't on the field as long with the shorter field. He probably saw something and was
that's right.
He was just that was just him, looking at the scouting report and going, all right, I'm going to do the defensive solid here.
That's the thing. Instead of being a 14-play touchdown drive, it would end up being a 17-play touchdown drive. Defense was more tired in the fourth quarter. So I think Peyton was just looking ahead.
Kirk Benedict, I hope you're listening to this and taking notes because this will come in very handy. I'm glad you shouted out Gunnar Stockton, the hold, because I did not see it live. I think it was just because it was late in the game and I was working on my story, but oh my God. And he did a great job. They asked him about it after the game. Holly Rowe did, and Gunnar was like, no, it wasn't that bad. But
shout out Bo Gardner, though. It's the only time I can really think of in his 2 years that Bo Gardner's had a low snap like that as well. So the fact that we're talking about him saving it, the reason we're never talking about that kind of stuff is because Bo Gardner is very good at his job as well.
All right, next, offensive breakthrough player. And just to kind of describe this one, a player that has been at Georgia that you feel like has taken a step forward, that has played a bigger and more important role. So I'll start with you, Ben. Who is your offensive breakthrough player through the first half of the season?
I've got to think there's going to be some consistency across the board on this one. I mentioned him earlier. I mean, Chauncey Bowens, we're going to talk about it later in the show about our fantasy team drafts that we did in the offseason looking ahead to the season. And none of us took Chauncey Bowens at running back. And I mean, this is really a two-headed rushing attack. I saw the statistic, and I can't remember who shared it, so I wish that I did, but it's a Pro Football Focus stat that there's only 2 teams in college football that have 2 running backs with player grades over 80 right now, Notre Dame and Georgia, and that's Nate Frazier and Chauncey Bowens. And I think everybody had expectations for Nate Frazier coming into the season. We've heard about Chauncey Bowens behind the scenes, that he's had flashes, that he maybe surprised people when he first got here with what they were expecting right away. I mean, what he was doing in that Alabama game, albeit a loss, there were moments in that game where I kept looking over and I said, I didn't know Chauncey Bowens had this. Like, I didn't know he could get the edge on an SEC linebacker or even a corner at times like he was doing. And so it's just given Georgia such a different confidence level in the running back room. I think that tandem with what Josh McCray does so well just makes them so dangerous. And I don't know that when Nate has his fumble against Alabama and Georgia gets a little bit concerned there, if you don't have Chauncey Bowens, even like you don't win that game. But I think what Chauncey did gives you confidence going into future games saying, all right, we now know that if we've got to roll back Nate Frazier's workload, Chauncey Bowens is more than able to step up and be that guy at running back. I mean, I'm sure that there's people that would, say that he is the guy at running back right now, that he is the number one guy. I know last week, Nate sort of recaptured the primary workload, but I think that it's going to be back and forth based on matchups and based on what Georgia thinks that they didn't practice that week. And I think Chauncey Bowens is doing that. I did not see that coming at all this season.
Yeah, Chauncey Bowens is my pick, too, for offensive breakthrough player. You mentioned the Alabama game. 12 carries, 119 yards, and a touchdown. On the season, 70 carries, 276 yards, averaging 5.4 yards per carry, and he's got 4 touchdowns. He's been fantastic, and I think Georgia's in a good spot right now, kind of with a two-headed monster with Chauncey Bowens and Nate Frazier. And I think you're going to see them ride the hot hand with those two. Whoever's playing well, they're going to let them go. I think that's what you saw with Nate Frazier against Ole Miss. He had, I think, 17 carries. I know it was his season high. So I think you'll see a lot of both of them leading the way going forward. Kipp, is your pick Chauncey Bowens, or are you going to go somewhere else for the offensive breakthrough player?
No, we got to go with Chauncey Bowens. I think, again, when you mentioned Nate Frazier, the 2 games where Nate Frazier doesn't have double-digit carries this season, again, the Alabama game and then the Kentucky game the week after, those were Chauncey Bowens' breakout games. Those are the two games where he basically put the offense on his back. And the Alabama game was just the eye-opening moment for all of us, really. But, he followed it up with a really solid game against Kentucky as well, and then outstanding against Ole Miss. I think at this point you know that he's good for over 5 yards a touch, and I think that's just not something anyone could have seen coming really for his role in this offense. He's the guy that, even if he's spelling Nate Frazier, opposing defenses know that when he comes in the game, like, we're gonna have some issues here bringing him down. His balance, outstanding. Nate Frazier's improved as far as his vision, but I think that's been because of his, the fumbling issue is now he has to be patient. But Chauncey, that's just what he brings to the table. He lets his blockers get set and open up the lanes for him. And I think it's just been really tough for opponents to bring him down, which makes sense. He's over 220 pounds. So I think that if you're looking at Georgia's backfield and you kind of know when Nate Frazier comes in, it's the perimeter run attack, definitely know what's coming, whenever Josh McCray comes in. Good luck. That's my fellow 240-pound club member there. Chauncey's just kind of that perfect balance of just outstanding acceleration and a guy that can get yards after the tackle, which I think in this offense is kind of something that Georgia knows they have to lean on moving forward.
I feel like all of the defensive accolades here, I'm just really interested to see who y'all go with. And I'll start defensive breakthrough player. And this is someone I don't think statistically, I don't know that his numbers really stand out, but I continue to see plays when I do the rewatch and be like, yeah, this guy's coming around. Quintavious Johnson. I think that they'd be in a really tough spot at outside linebacker. Coming into the year, when they picked up Elo Mendoza, we just all penciled him in, or at least I did, saying, well, this Army guy's going to come in and start. And, I think that we kind of overestimated the adjustment he was going to have to make. Quintavious Johnson has stepped up and played really well. And I thought in that Ole Miss game, late in that game, you started seeing him help bring the pressure. And, that entire front, I thought, really got to Trinidad Chambliss. I thought he was noticeably inaccurate, especially compared to the first three quarters. I mean, his throws just were not hitting the mark, and I think that they deserve a lot of credit for how they were able to affect him. And I think Quintavious Johnson was a big piece of that. If he's not there, I think that they are kind of scrambling. We've seen some of Elo, we've seen some of Chris Jones, but I really like what Quintavious Johnson has shown. Even if the stats don't pop off the page, I like him, and I think that he's someone that, getting this bye week and then getting ready for the second half of the season, maybe we will see him be even more productive going into the second half. All right, Kipp, who is your defensive breakthrough player?
Man, this one's tough. Honestly, I feel like we're still waiting for a defensive player to break through, but I'm just going to go based off of what I just saw in the last game. I like DeMello Jones. I think that one thing we've kind of learned with DeMello is that he's handsy. He's going to get his hands on you and be physical. And you know what? Like, you might have to live with whether the refs want to go in which direction as far as the flags go. But I also think, again, every snap he gets, I think he's continuing to get more confident. I think Georgia's going to get more confident with allowing them to play closer to the line of scrimmage, not giving that free release, getting his hands on guys at the line of scrimmage, doing what he does best. But I think, moving forward and especially looking towards next year with him and Ellis, you have to be really excited about the potential for Georgia's secondary. But I think over the second half of the season, you're going to see just a more confident DeMello Jones, a guy that's really gotten into that rotation. Kind of maybe a split right now with Ellis Robinson out there, but regardless of if he's spelling Ellis or, out, playing the entire game, he hasn't been a guy that's been afraid of, the task of whoever he's lining up against in the SEC. So usually when you're playing cornerback at Georgia and it's your first year getting major playing time, you get picked on a lot. Maybe that was the case early in the season, but I think right now he's up to the task. And I don't think that's something you've been able to really say about Georgia cornerbacks in their first year getting the amount of playing time that he's getting right now.
DeMello Jones, 14 tackles, 3 pass breakups to this point, and he had a huge one to get that stop against Ole Miss. Great timing to get his hand up to break up the football on third down. Quintavious Johnson, 19 tackles, 2 tackles for loss to this point in the season. Ben, who are you going with for defensive breakthrough player?
Not necessarily someone that I think any of us are surprised that broke through early, but Elijah Griffin playing as much as he has played for – does that count?
I was going to save him for freshman, but if you want to go there, because
No,
we're going to do,
okay,
we're going to do,
no, that's fine.
Give us somebody that has been at Georgia.
Been at Georgia already. All right. I'm going to go with, and he hasn't been perfect this year. There have been moments where he has gotten picked on from time to time in coverage, and we kind of knew that coming in. But I think that Georgia needed Janelle Aguero this season. And I think that, if Janelle Aguero's not out there right now, I think we really got to ask the question, who is? When in the Auburn game, when Dalen Everett went down, I remember we thought from where we were sitting, it was 8, not 6. And I was saying, all right, who is that? Is it going to be Jaden Harris out there, who we just have not seen play whatsoever this season? I know that Kirby Smart's talked recently about DeMello Jones getting some work at nickel. Maybe that's what the answer would be there. I don't know. But Georgia needed Janelle Aguero to be good this season. I think part of the reason that you've seen Georgia get picked apart in coverage a little bit from time to time is probably because Janelle Aguero, that's where, he has some room to improve. But he, picked the ball off in the Tennessee game. He's made some key plays here and there. And as a guy that was a former 5-star or flirting with 5-star, I can't remember exactly where he finished up, but he hasn't quite been like a focal member of this defense yet. He now is clearly the star nickel corner on this defense. And I think not only has he broken through and been that guy the first half, Georgia really needs him to even take another step here this back half of the season as well.
Janelle Aguero, 23 tackles, the 1 interception against Tennessee, which Ben mentioned, half a tackle for loss, 3 pass breakups to this point in the season. We're going to take a quick break, come back and do our second half of superlatives, and also go through our Georgia football roster draft from back in June. All right, guys, jumping right back into it. Transfer portal MVP, a player that Georgia added this past offseason that you feel like has been the MVP. I think we're going to be at a consensus here, but I'll set up Ben. Who is the transfer portal MVP for Georgia?
I mean, I think that we are going to be at a consensus here because I think what I'm going to pick here, I believe, is what you all are going to pick. And we'll have a conversation about, I guess, the other options after the fact. But I think you got to go with Zachariah Branch at this point, right? Assuming we're excluding Colby Young, like if we're talking about the most recent transfer portal, because London Humphreys, you can make a strong case for London Humphreys. If he doesn't make that play on 4th down against Tennessee, we're having a big different conversation as well. So if we're talking about most recent transfer portal window, I think you got to say Zachariah Branch. I mean, he's the go-to guy in the return game. I know that he hasn't done anything game changing in the return game yet, but he's shown some flashes there. And I think that he's very reliable back there. Of course, what he's done in the screen game early in the season to create some explosives out of the quick game, I think is a weapon Georgia hasn't gone back to as much over the last few weeks, but something tells me that they've got some of that in their arsenal to be able to create some big plays with him in that game that they've deviated from. Not only that, I mean, you think of him as the get the ball in his hands in space guy. He's had some huge 3rd down conversions in more contested coverage. I don't want to say 50-50 situations, but not your typical Zachariah Branch routes as you would probably be expecting him to be running, just showing the versatility that he has as a wide receiver. And I think he's got a huge leadership role on this team as well. I think that's something that I majorly didn't realize coming into the season, just how great of a culture fit he really is. Him and Noah Thomas both unbelievable culture fits in terms of what Georgia does, in terms of the unselfishness and understanding of how Georgia operates offensively, and that you're never going to be a wide receiver 1 stat chasing at Georgia. And I think that everybody that comes to Georgia as a wide receiver transfer appreciates that.
Yeah, looking at what Zachariah Branch has done to this point, 35 catches, 362 yards, 2 touchdowns. Punt returns, 5 returns, 57 yards. Kick returns, 5 returns, 91 yards. I thought he had a really good game against Ole Miss. They took a deep shot with him at one point, and he caught it one-on-one coverage, made a big catch on a 3rd down where Gunner sort of rolled out to the right, and Branch came back and made the catch to help them convert. And then 4th quarter, man, he had a jump cut that I thought looked like something out of Madden. Like, he's just unreal. I feel like for transfer MVP, really the only other player I think you can make the case for is Josh McCray. But my pick is Zachariah Branch. I mean, he's just been so phenomenal, done such a great job. And now, going to be relied on, I think, even more as one of the go-to targets with Colby Young unavailable going forward. Kipp, you got Zachariah Branch, or are you going somewhere else for transfer MVP?
No, I love what Branch has brought to the table for this team. A guy that whenever Gunnar Stockton's not at his best, when he's not making his best throws, Zachariah Branch is like, it's fine, I'll just make something out of nothing. And early on this season, like much to everyone's, I guess, there was a lot of groaning going on at the amount of screens Georgia was utilizing. But I mean, when you saw Branch out there and you're like, he's still, breaking off 38, 40 yards on some of these. And then later on in the season, when, they're kind of using the whole field, you also saw the impact he had because he was just taking so much of the defense's attention. I mean, they're using him as a decoy out there, and it's opening up one-on-one matchups for, for Lawson Lucky, for Dylan Bell. And so I think that aspect is something that they sorely needed. They went all of last season without someone that made defenses, secondaries afraid, that actually took their eyes. I mean, yeah, they knew Arian Smith was going to get behind them, but they still knew that they had the 50-50 shot that the ball wouldn't stay in his hands. So I just think that having a reliable guy who could make plays in space has been a godsend to this offense and really opened up a lot of opportunities, not just for Branch, for the rest of the team. And it kind of got Gunnar Stockton comfortable. I mean, first-year starter, you needed a guy out there who was a veteran presence, who could kind of calm your nerves a little bit when you're like, man, I'm not having my best game throwing the ball. I'm not seeing the entire field. He's like, you don't have to see the entire field. Just get the ball to me and I'll make it happen. So definitely been, a refreshing addition to this offense, and a reminder that, yeah, you can get some wins out of the portal.
Freshman MVP, and this can be for either side of the ball. I'll start with this one and say that I was torn between two guys at the same position, or, among the offensive linemen, but I'm going to go with Juan Gaston. He's a guy that I remember Ben talking about back in the spring. It was like they're pretty excited about this guy. They feel pretty good, about what they've got. He starts at right guard. He gets banged up a little bit. Ernest Green's out. They play him at right tackle. He's moved back to right guard. He's played through an ankle injury. And there's at least a couple plays a game where you just watch him do something, and it's unreal. I mean, he's pushing guys around. For my rewatch story on Wednesday, I included a GIF of him going up against a guy that was one-on-one with Ernest Green, and, I mean, he just pushed him to the ground. Just threw him like he wasn't even in the play. So future is super bright for Juan Gaston. Was very tempted to pick Donnie Glover here, but I'm going with Juan just because he's had that versatility to move between guard and tackle. And with what they've had with the other injuries on the offensive line, I think they'd be in really rough shape if they did not have Juan Gaston. Kipp, who is your freshman MVP so far?
I got to go with Donnie Glover. I mean, who had him playing this role this season? Who had him joining the team in the summer, and then playing the amount of snaps he's had? It's been, incredible to watch. We didn't really know, and if we're going to talk about our drafts a little later in the show, what we thought was going to happen at right guard was not at all what happened when the season began, and what we're looking at right now. And I just think, my goodness, credit to Glover to coming in and getting himself prepared to play SEC football as a true freshman. It's been incredible to watch, and I think especially in the run game, what he brings to the table when he gets out there in space. He's got some of the most impressive blocks on this offensive line. And I think, they sent, interior linemen to the NFL draft this past year who are all starting. But I think some of the blocks he's had out there, again, as a pulling guard, I don't know if I saw those consistently last season. I just think he's just bringing a different aspect to the table, a guy that is not afraid just to get dirty and muck it up there in the trenches. And I just think that mentality that he has kind of given this offense a little bit of an identity, especially the offensive line, and stabilized. I mean, where would they be right now if he's not playing 50-plus snaps a game at right guard the last 4 games? I'm not really sure. I just think credit to him, and it's completely changed the depth chart. And I mean, is he going to is he going anywhere as a starting right guard anytime soon as a true freshman? I'm not sure. I think it's going to be tough to take him out of the lineup moving forward. And I just think that's a huge find for Georgia, huge eval win for them, getting somebody who, you could see playing at Alabama right now. So I think he's my breakout player as far as the freshmen go, and a guy that just really been impressed with every single game.
The Georgia staff needs to send Nick Saban a thank you for retiring because that really helped Georgia wind up getting Donnie Glover. Ben, who's your pick for freshman MVP?
Yeah, it stinks for Elijah Griffin that you made me take him off of my breakthrough players because I'm not going to take him here. I'm going to take Dontrell Glover. I mean, I think for one, I'm always, we're unbiased journalists, of course, but he did join the show in the spring. And so, we got a little tip of the cap to Dontrell Glover for being one of the, Junkyard Dawgcast guests that we've had this season. I also got to give a shout out, and I can't remember who it was. Someone in our YouTube comments months ago, what we were talking about the offensive line and concerns going into the year and Stacey Searles' status, which is funny because it's just not a conversation that I feel like we're having right now, despite the fact that Georgia can't stay healthy on the offensive line, and we're still not really having that conversation right now. It's funny. But someone said Georgia's offensive line is going to be fine because Dontrell Glover is going to be here to save the day, or something along those lines. And I, after the show, said to Jordan, I was like, I don't know if you saw this comment, but clearly someone doesn't understand that when you're coming in as a freshman in May, you're not starting on a Georgia offensive line on the interior offensive line. I don't know if it was Stacey Searles' burner account or who it was that knew what they had in Dontrell Glover, but hand up, you know who you are if you're listening to this. And, Dontrell Glover saved this offensive line this season. I mean, look, there have only been 5 players on Georgia's offense that have played more than 375 snaps this season. It's Gunnar Stockton, Drew Bobo, Micah Morris, Monroe Freeling, and Dontrell Glover. That's the 3 most reliable offensive linemen that you've had and your quarterback. And the next guy up is a guy that had been there for 3 months when the season started. You talk to people over at Langston Hughes, and nobody there is surprised. They say, they know how special of a human being Dontrell Glover is when he has goals that he is shooting for and things that he is trying to attain for himself. He's done that and more, and Georgia needed every single one of those 398 snaps to start this season.
Yeah, I remember. I can verify Ben's story, and if there's a way, if you're out there listening, if you could prove that was you, I will comp your 24/7 subscription because you called your shot, and Ben and I talked about it afterwards like, who is this? All right, unsung hero on offense, and I'll go first just to also kind of explain the award. Just a guy that you feel like has been really crucial to the offense and just hasn't gotten enough credit for it. And I'll go back to the offensive line and give it to Michael Morris. He's a guy that just, man, watching him pull is something special. And I think specifically about the Tennessee game in overtime, he gets out there and clears the lane for Nate Frazier for the big run that winds up setting up the game-winning touchdown for Josh McCray. Josh McCray, I think, could also have a case for this award. But no, I mean, Mike is one of the veteran guys, and what he's been able to do, he's battled some injury too. He started the season, he was playing with a club on his hand, but he was like, I'm going to be out there and I'm going to play for my team. I think that Micah deserves a lot of credit as one of the veterans on this offensive line. Can count on him, can know that he's going to be out there and make plays, and if he can physically go out there, he's going to do what he can. I think that was a couple games ago, he hurt his shoulder and came out for a little bit and then popped right back in there and did his part to help Georgia. So I'm giving Micah Morris the unsung hero of the Georgia offense through the first half of the season. Ben, who are you going with for this award?
What's interesting is a guy that I think would have had been all over this award. He might have been over a few of the awards we've been talking about, would have been Ethan Barbour if he hadn't gotten injured. I firmly believe that. I think that he was someone that was setting up to just change the dynamic of personnel options Georgia was going to be able to have. That said, I don't know how unsung he is. He's been around forever. But there was conversation early in the season when Georgia was trying to get Dylan Bell involved in certain spots. And I feel like on our boards, people were saying like, are they forcing it to 86 too much, whatever. It's like he comes up so big in so many key spots. I mean, even, the Ole Miss catch that he had that was blatant pass interference that I don't know how the flag doesn't get thrown there, but it doesn't matter because Dylan Bell makes the play. You talk about some plays that he made in the screen game against Tennessee to pick up some key third down conversions. Even the Alabama game, they run different variations of this little I don't even know how you would describe what they are doing with Dylan Bell when they're, the end around, fake end around, reverse, double reverse. Like, they have so many different wrinkles that they add to when they put Dylan Bell in motion. They clearly just see him as a dynamic playmaker in a way that they don't have with other guys on this offense. And so Kirby Smart brought it up last week, or it might have been early. It might have been earlier this week. I can't remember, but about how do you create explosives? Like, they do the research on it, and the best way is just get the ball as quickly as possible to your guys that are creating those explosive plays. And clearly Dylan Bell is someone that they have identified as has the ability to do that, because they get him involved in a variety of different ways, and he is able to create explosives. He's not built in a way that would make you think he would be that guy. Like, he has more of that running back tight end type of build to the wide receiver position than a typical wide receiver, but he makes plays, and he makes plays however you get him the ball. And so I think that he's someone that has probably been an unsung hero for Georgia for quite some time now, and I think that this season has just only reinforced that.
I think that's a great pick. 13 receptions, 146 yards. He's also rushed 7 times for 61 yards, 2 touchdowns. And, one of those jet sweeps Kipp talked about earlier, how Zachariah Branch can kind of be a decoy. That big run that Dylan had against Alabama, they had Zachariah run back like he was going to take the ball from Dylan on a reverse. Dylan keeps it and has room to run up the left side. So I thought that was a great example of that. Kipp, who do you think is the unsung hero on this Georgia offense?
If it weren't for this last game, the choice would have been a lot easier for me. But, they decided to reintroduce the tight end position into Georgia's offense. And I kind of think, Lawson Loki and Oscar Delp kind of cancel each other out. They've both played a ton of snaps. They both spent most of the season, blocking their tails off. But then they both, kind of got rewarded for it in the last game. So I'm going to go kind of a different direction and pick someone who's probably been 4th or 5th in the wide receiver snaps most of the season. Doesn't have really anything to show for it so far, and was a guy that, everyone had a lot of expectations for in the season. Noah Thomas. I think that he's a guy that, again, is playing 50 snaps in a game to where he doesn't get the ball, in a shootout. Playing 30 snaps where he gets 1 target and it's an OPI. It seems like he's had more throws to him that have been penalties than he's caught. So I think it's a situation where they asked him to buy in. They asked him to think about the long game. They asked him to buy into a culture that may be different than what he's coming from, where he led the team in touchdowns. And you haven't heard anything behind the scenes about Noah Thomas being unhappy. Now they're probably going to be asking him and some other guys to step into a different role. But I think, if it's a different situation, he may have already just taken himself off the team or, given up. Just the fact that he's got 4 catches right now, through 7 games. And again, like I said, he's right in there with maybe slightly behind London Humphreys, maybe a little bit ahead of him after this last game as far as snap count during the season, but just doesn't have the numbers to show up for it. And I think that's unsung hero, just a guy that's going out there and practiced every day, helping Georgia get better, and knowing that, his expectations for his role probably aren't what they've been so far, but he is now going to be asked to do something different and probably going to be just maybe a regular hero. So for me, he's my unsung hero. I thought about Drew Bobo a lot, but I give Drew Bobo love all the time, so I can't give him the unsung hero. So I'm going to give it to a guy that, is mainly a game day thread mention. Every single week, it's like the prediction, this is it. He hasn't broken out yet, but yet at the end of the day, he's playing a lot and doing the dirty work for Georgia.
Had a huge catch against Auburn that set up a big touchdown. I think that's worth shouting out. All right, unsung hero on defense. I'm going to let you start, Ben. Who do you have for unsung hero on defense for Georgia?
Unsung hero on defense. I'm going to go with someone that I brought up to you in the box on Saturday when we were watching the game. I think Xavier McLeod is just quietly one of Georgia's more solid defensive players. Like Kirby Smart brought it up. If Georgia's not going to be rushing the passer or affecting the passer at the point of attack, like you've got to be deflecting passes. Josh Horton and Xavier McLeod have clearly have a skill there that nobody else in the room has proven yet to this point in games, at least, that they have that skill. So I think that that's the case. I think that Xavier McLeod is great in run stop. He's out there, a lot. I don't know exactly where he stacks up in defensive total snap counts. I mean, the defensive linemen get rotated so much, so he's down there. But he just seems to step up, and I think that, again, I might be forecasting as much as I am talking about the first half of the season when I say, like, Georgia kind of needs Xavier McLeod to be that unsung hero for the rest of this season because, like Kipp said, this defense is predicated on defensive linemen freeing up space for these linebackers to be able to create plays. You need Christian Miller. You need Xavier McLeod. You need Josh Horton. You need Joseph Jonah-Ajonye. You need Gabe. Like, you need all these guys just being a little bit better than they have been. And I think that Xavier McLeod's been one of the more consistent, reliable guys up front there.
7 tackles, 2 pass breakups. He had a huge one getting a paw up and deflecting a pass that set up Georgia's first stop on defense against Ole Miss. Kipp, who is your unsung hero on the Georgia defense?
Well, if he hadn't gotten hurt, I would have said Kyron Jones, just because, goodness, like, who had that being his role going into the season? But I'll pick the guy that stepped up and replaced him last week, Ja'Cory Thomas. Like, that was one of Ben's questions, like, what's it gonna look like with no Kyron Jones now? And he comes out there and he plays the entire game, at safety. And yeah, it was a shootout, but I don't remember ever saying, man, like, Ja'Cory just got beat on that. Like he didn't really have any coverage breakdowns overall that I saw. It's just, they were just giving him that cushion and they were taking advantage of it. Didn't really see any missed tackles either. And I think that's kind of been Ja'Cory Thomas this season. I think he's been solid for Georgia. And I'm giving it to him just because, in a game where every single play mattered, him giving up a big play or something in the third or fourth quarter could have been the difference in the game, and he didn't. He gave him solid play from start to finish, and I don't know if he's locked in. I mean, we're going into this bye week. I would imagine it's going to be an open competition for, who steps into that Kyron Jones role, full time. Like, does Adrian Maddox make a move? Do they switch guys around? But I think right now they feel a little bit better about that position just because, Ja'Cory Thomas gave him solid play, probably, maybe his best play of the season to date.
I'm going to go with Ben on this one. I was going to say Ja'Cory Thomas, 17 tackles to this point. I'm going to go with Xavier McLeod. He's a guy that I've been impressed with since he got to Georgia last year, and he's a guy that hadn't played a ton of snaps, but continues to get in the rotation, continues to make plays. I just feel like when he's out there, he makes plays. And it's kind of looking over the different guys who would be options, considered Gabe Harris, considered Chris Cole as well, but I just think Xavier McLeod, man, they need some guys to step up on that defensive line, and I think that he is primed to continue to do that, like Ben said, going forward. We're going to kind of piggyback off of that. So Georgia's got 5 regular season games left. I want each of you guys to give me, and we'll start with offense, one guy that you think will break through in these final 5 games, play a bigger role than he has in the first 7 games. And Ben, I'll start with you. Give me a breakthrough player for Georgia's offense going into the second half of the season.
I think there's a few ways that you can go here. Some guys that haven't played a whole lot that could. Some guys that have played a lot but haven't been like the guy yet, but now are probably going to be asked to. But I'm going to go the freshman route, and I am going to go with an offensive player at a position that we know Georgia has a lot of talent at that position, but Elias Williams keeps showing up in some spots, and Georgia has tried to get him involved even in the offense from time to time. We saw when Ryan Puglisi came in the Kentucky game, like he was Ryan Puglisi's go-to guy on his primary drive that he had. And so I think he's going to be he is a freak. When you see him out there, like he is definitely you do the little walk around the field before the game and you kind of just eye up and size up all the players on both teams. You say, man, 10 on Georgia just looks like he's built from a different place than everybody else is. I think that these freshmen are always the ones that are probably going to benefit the most from these bye weeks because Georgia's going to have a chance to go sit back. Coaches will sit back, self-assess. Where do you need to see some improvements? Explosive playmaking is certainly going to be one of them. He's not going to be a, crazy dynamic playmaker, but when you lose a guy like Colby Young, who are the guys out there that Georgia has that you can line up outside or really anywhere on the field, get them into a one-on-one matchup and just kind of heave it up to them and hope they make a play on 3rd and 7, 3rd and 10. Like Noah Thomas is one that you could probably consider for this award as well. Like CJ Wiley is one that you could probably consider for this award as well. But I think at the tight end position, I don't know that anybody fits that more than Elias Williams. And I think him just having 2 weeks for Georgia to find new creative ways to incorporate him in the offense. Like it's telling to me that Elias Williams has played, if I'm not mistaken, about the same amount of snaps as Jaden Riddell, a little less snaps than Jaden Riddell this season. But given the fact that Jaden Riddell has been around the program so much longer, it just shows you Georgia's going to try and find ways to get Elias Williams out there.
I think Elias is a fantastic pick. I'm going to go with a guy you mentioned a second ago in CJ Wiley, and you mentioned Colby Young. I think guys are going to have to step up with Colby Young out and probably out for the rest of the regular season at least. We haven't really gotten a timetable there, but CJ Wiley, I thought it was really interesting. Kirby Smart on Tuesday was saying that he's one of the guys that they bring up with the offense rather than letting him run with the scout team so he can kind of learn the offense. He can kind of understand if he gets put in situations where he's got to play more, what's being asked of him. 6'4", I think he's still going to be the guy behind Noah Thomas, but I think you'll see more opportunity for CJ Wiley, and I think he's fully capable of taking advantage of it and making plays. Kipp, who is your breakthrough player for the second half when it comes to the offense?
Yeah, I think that looking directly at Noah Thomas and CJ Wiley makes a ton of sense, but also in the bye week, I think they could put Dylan Belmore at the X position as well, and I think he'll probably spend more time there. So I think that opens things up for Landon Rolden to get on the field a little bit more. And again, this is that chance for him, the opening to get on the field, and all the reports out of practices, again, I mean, the kid, he can move. He's got a different level of vertical threat that a lot of guys in this position room don't have. I think if he's shown them in practice earlier in the season what he can do, this is that stretch where he can get some momentum during this open week and earn the opportunity to hear his name called, get some important snaps in the second half of the season. So I'm just going to go a little bit different direction and project that Dylan Bell's playing more outside. You're asking, one of the guys that's impressed a lot in practice to step into a bigger role. And I think Landon's set up to maybe make a couple explosives towards the end of the season.
All right, same question for the defense. Second half breakthrough. I'll start with you again, Ben. Who do you see as the second half breakthrough on this defense?
I'm going to go back to a guy that Kipp mentioned a little bit earlier in the show, and that's DeMello Jones. I mean, I think that he has that physicality and tenacity. And look, I'm going to say I think that probably as a whole we've been a little unfair to Ellis Robinson. Like he has made some plays. He has, like in the Auburn game, he defends in the end zone. He makes a play in the Ole Miss game. He I don't want to say makes a play, but he's in coverage to force a third down. Trinidad Chambliss ends up scoring a touchdown with his legs the next play, but Ellis Robinson forced him into a 3rd and goal from the 7. And so, like, I think that there has been some unfairness probably in terms of how people have judged Ellis Robinson's first stint as a Georgia starting cornerback. But I think DeMello Jones has just looked natural out there. He's someone that I was very high on. I picked for my spring breakouts draft before Ellis Robinson and then bailed on him, I guess, which we'll talk about here later at the end of the show. But he just, he mentioned it yesterday when he met with reporters. He's a South Georgia guy. That's where real football's played. Like he plays football like a real football player. He gets your hands on you. He gets his hands on you. He's a just natural athlete, playmaker. And I think that Georgia needs to be more comfortable in press man coverage in the back half of the season. They need to be able to give more looks. Like right now, they are just being very vanilla, very comfortable, making you execute in front of them. You're not going to be able to do that when you get into championship time down the stretch of the season. And so I think just having a guy like DeMello Jones that seems like he's that type of guy at corner, it's only going to make this defense more dynamic in the last half.
Kipp, who are you going with for your defensive breakthrough player in the second half?
I love that pick because I think he's also going to get some more snaps at star as well. And they don't usually play cornerbacks there because just the physicality they ask you to have at that position. But they've already shown they feel comfortable with him playing that position. And I think, if Jonell has some struggles, I think they'll plug him in there. So I do love that pick, but I'm going to go with a different player that you guys mentioned earlier, and that's Quintavious Johnson. I think that you saw him, early on the season, it was kind of he's playing on rundowns and, or they'd have Gabe Harris out there playing and not really have an edge. Now you're seeing him playing more passing downs. He's taken some snaps from Elo, and you've seen him flash as a pass rusher. And I think that's what he's learning to do right now is to get off blocks and make plays consistently. And that's basically the one area that he hasn't unlocked. And it's just coincidentally the one area that Georgia needs him to unlock. I mean, this defense, if you can actually have someone affecting the quarterback at the edge position, it changes everything. And so I just look at the number of snaps he's played as a first-year player, a guy that, again, we've brought up before, former quarterback in high school at Mays, still kind of getting into this position. But I think if you're going to talk about how important snaps are in games, you've given him a ton of snaps. The open week gives him a chance to catch his breath and focus on being a better pass rusher. I think he's set up to this. Again, he's played a lot, but I think as far as breakthrough, I think he's got a chance to – he hasn't notched his first career sack yet. I think he's got a chance to get, 2, 3, maybe even 4 sacks the second half of the season, get in the backfield more. And maybe we're talking about, him being in the running as second half MVP. Because if he's making plays in the backfield, then maybe we're not talking about Georgia's defense as being, an issue or something that's holding this team back.
My pick is Justin Williams at linebacker. Kipp mentioned C.J. Allen getting pulled for a little bit because he was struggling pass coverage. It was Justin Williams who came in and played that position in his place. I think he's a guy that has made real strides in his sophomore year. His stats don't really pop off the page, but I think it was the Kentucky game. He made several plays. You're seeing him put it together. I really like where Justin Williams is at this point, and I think he's got a bright future ahead, even talking about the rest of this year. All right, we've hinted at it a couple times, but we're going to dive into our 2025 Georgia roster draft. Now, we did this draft back in mid-June, and so we've had a chance to watch these guys play 7 games to this point. I will bring up the teams and go through each of them, and then we'll kind of all take turns talking about how the draft went, some of the hits, and probably more importantly, a few of the misses along the way as I fumble with our logo, trying not to cover up my face on the video. All right, so I had the first pick. My team, running back Nate Frazier, defensive back Dalen Everett, outside linebacker Elo Mendoza, wide receiver Colby Young, offensive lineman Micah Morris, inside linebacker Raylan Wilson, defensive lineman Jordan Hall, receiver Dylan Bell, defensive lineman Elijah Griffin, defensive back Zion Branch, offensive lineman Bo Hewley. Kipp's team, wide receiver Zachariah Branch, running back Roderick Robinson, defensive lineman Christian Miller, offensive lineman Drew Bobo, defensive lineman Gabe Harris, offensive lineman Daniel Calhoun, outside linebacker Quintavious Johnson, defensive back Ja'Cory Thomas, defensive back Janelle Aguero, tight end Lawson Lucky, inside linebacker Chris Cole, Ben's team, inside linebacker C.J. Allen, defensive back K.J. Bolden, offensive lineman Monroe Freeling, offensive lineman Ernest Green, receiver Noah Thomas, tight end Oscar Delp, defensive back Daniel Harris, defensive lineman Joseph Jonah Ajonye, and defensive lineman Xavier McLeod. I want to just start and have each of us kind of talk about our teams, and I'll start with you, Ben. What do you think of your team specifically, how it has shaped up through 7 games this year?
Well, just looking at that, I mean, ran the table on first half defensive MVP with my first pick, so I got to feel pretty good there. I'm happy to have KJ Bolden. Somehow KJ Bolden, and this sort of goes to my conversation around like unsung hero and some other awards. Like, we're just not talking about KJ Bolden right now, and I think when nothing's great in the secondary, or nothing's great on defense, period. Let me correct that. And we're just not really talking about mistakes that KJ Bolden is making. Like, I think that's probably an indicator of where he's like the bright spot on the defense. And because of that, we're just not talking about him. Monroe Freeling, I think the story of his grit to get back for the Auburn game, he's, top 5 on the offense in snaps this season, despite being banged up for a lot of the season. Where would Georgia be without him? Ernest Green has been banged up, so that's probably a bit of an overdraft, but I thought he was great against Ole Miss too. I thought it was one of the best games that he's had in the last 2 years, really. And, he's still bouncing back from injury, so we'll see. Noah Thomas got a few awards, got a few some superlatives from Kipp. So I guess I got to be pleased about that one. I didn't give him any superlatives, but I think that he's someone that, projecting to the back half of the season like that, I think that could show up pretty well. Oscar Delp, someone that could be up for unsung hero, probably just doesn't get talked about a lot, just consistently reliable. I think I mentioned those top 5 in snap counts. He's number 6 right behind that. So he's, one of the more reliable people that Georgia has. Daniel Harris, that was the first whiff, I would say, I had of the season. He had some mistakes in the Tennessee game that were costly, and then has not participated on defense, has, as I learned before we did this show, has been involved in some punt return snaps here in weeks 5, 6, and 7, but not really seeming to be a part of the cornerback rotation anymore. Joseph Jonah Ajonye, Xavier McLeod, guys that they've been out there, they've impacted, and still need to see a little bit more out of them for this defense to feel where it's at. Josh McCray, I thought he might get a mention in the transfer portal MVP conversation. Didn't. I think on his 4th and 1 play alone, the more I watch that play, the more I say, how in the world did Georgia win this game? Because I don't know how they got that 1 yard. And if they don't get that 1 yard, I don't know how they win that game. It's like almost an opposite screen grab of the Cash Jones screen grab, which may be a sign that you wanted someone other than Cash Jones out there, that it's just like, Josh McCray can just make a yard happen when it doesn't exist. And I think that we're going to see more Josh McCray in the second half of the season. And then you did, undo the little bottom bar and show that Isaiah Gibson was also on my team. He's not on the travel roster right now. If I could have that pick back, I would put Darren Akingbon in that spot probably, just because Darren Akingbon is on the travel roster. I think he is very close. And that's a guy that if we're talking about who is someone second half of the season that we haven't seen any of on the defensive side that maybe could make an impact and may be a difference maker, Darren Akingbon is the name to watch there. So I would probably, if I could have one back, I probably would keep everything that I did. Even Daniel Harris, I'd probably keep everything that I have there, and I'd probably just get Darren Akingbon on my team because I think he's going to have a good back half of the season.
Not to totally derail this episode, but I'm kind of surprised, Ben, when we did Unsung Hero on offense. I just figured you would just come out guns blazing and go with Cash Jones.
You have no idea how close I was. Troll Ben was so close. I almost even made a comment about how badly I wanted to be the troll, but then I just figured, you know what? I don't need to do that. I still understand the Cash Jones experiment. I know a lot of people don't like it. So it's like, I don't want to, we're still going to see more Cash Jones this year. There's going to be situations where he gets put in and everyone's going to do the same song and dance that they do every single time. And how you react is all dependent on the outcome of the play. If the play works, everyone says, why is Cash Jones out there? How did this happen? If the play works, like it did on the 3rd and 4 run at midfield against Tennessee, everyone says, oh my God, Cash Jones? Like, whoa, like Bobo, genius, whatever. Like, how'd they think of that? So again, they're going to keep using him because they've been using him, and he's had a certain role on this team for 2 years now. He's going to continue to have a certain role on this team. So I did almost troll, but then I said, you know what? As a believer in Cash Jones, I'm not going to add fuel to this fire.
To defend you, he was wide open on the 2-point conversion on Saturday against Ole Miss. Now, end of the play, I don't know if any of y'all saw this. He tripped over the pylon and just absolutely ate it. But he was open before that, so I just wanted to make that point.
And not to sidetrack it too much, but what a different game that would have been if they just picked up those 3 yards. Like, we talk about everything that they had to go through. It's like, well, they had to go through that because they were in a 2-possession deficit for the whole 3rd quarter because they didn't get a 2-point conversion.
All right, Kip, what do you think of how your team came together and, more importantly, what these guys have done through 7 games?
I can't help but immediately wish I had one to take back, like Ben said. If I could take one back, I would have a different running back instead of Roderick Robinson. Just has not been a part of this backfield, and we've talked about Chauncey Bowens a lot. And also based on, looking at Ben's team, I wish I had switched my unsung hero and gone with Drew Bobo. Could have just racked it up right there and made a better argument for my team. Zachariah Branch, goes without saying, as far as non-quarterbacks go, making a ton of plays. Christian Miller, up and down with him so far. Hasn't really, been the disruptive force that I think we kind of expect him to be, but still playing an important role, still flashing a lot. Similar with Gabe Harris. We kind of talked about how he was going to be real important to this defensive front. He has been. He's played a lot of football. Still not sure we've seen the best of Gabe Harris. I picked the wrong guard. I picked the guard in camp and Daniel Calhoun that we thought was going to start. And goodness, he just got that role snatched from him. When everyone came out of the tunnel for that season opener, it was not Daniel Calhoun, and it has not been Daniel Calhoun. So, again, credit to Donnie Glover, credit to Juan Gaston. Those guys got ahead of him on the depth chart and never looked back. I like Quintavious Johnson and Ja'Cory Thomas. I think they're set up well for the second half. Jonell's, played an important role. So I think where I got him at this point in the draft, the next 2 guys, Lawson, just had a 3-touchdown game. Since Muhammad Massaquoi, if you do something that hasn't been done since Muhammad Massaquoi was playing, then you're doing pretty well for yourself. And like Ben said, he could have been in the mix for unsung hero because he's been out there blocking his tail off just as much as Oscar Delp has been. And I got him in the next to the last pick. So I like that draft value there. And we talked about the value of Chris Cole being the last pick in the draft. I'm not going to say that he's it's been like an instant, cash it situation for him. But he's still got 4 tackles for loss. He's still, tied for the team league with 3 sacks. I can't be mad at what the role he's played. There's been some up and down play with him, especially as far as, setting the edge. Not going to be something that, he's asked to do full time at this point. But as far as being a disruptor for Georgia's defense, per snap, he's been the best one in that role. So I like the value I got late. There's some picks in the first half that definitely have not panned out so far.
I feel pretty good on the whole with my team. Nate Frazier was my top pick. I think he was 1 overall. I had the Alabama fumble and had to bounce back from that, but had a fantastic game against Ole Miss. Dalen Everett's been pretty steady. But he's been part of a secondary that on the whole has given up some big plays. And he was the guy that was responsible for the 75-yard touchdown to start the 3rd quarter. First miss, 3rd pick, Ella Mendoza. I penciled him in as a starter. He's played more and more, but he's still not a starter, and definitely not the defensive player of the year that Cole Kublik was projecting going into this season. I'd feel great about Colby Young had he not gotten hurt. I mean, he has been fantastic. I mean, when I've written about him in these last few weeks before he got hurt, I was referring to him as Mr. Reliable. And I mean, fighting for extra yards. I mean, he was huge. And it really does stink that he got hurt because he was playing fantastic. Micah Morris, I mentioned earlier, unsung hero. Definitely made that pick not remembering he was on my team. You'll have to take my word for that because, I mean, he's just a gritty guy and he's fought through injury. Raylan Wilson, I kind of am still waiting to see him make a few more plays, but I think he is someone who quietly racks up tackles, and you look at the end of the game and you're like, wow, he had 6 or 7 tackles there. Jordan Hall, he was someone I considered for unsung hero on defense. He's made plays a lot late in games, and I'll tell you this, best interview on the team. Go watch his post-game Ole Miss. Now, if you have children, do not let them watch this because he let it fly, but Jordan Hall's been great. Probably my best value was Dylan Bell right here, and I think I might have even talked about it when we picked him. He's a guy that has been a weapon in different ways for Georgia. Elijah Griffin, he's played really well. I think Kirby said he's got like the 3rd most snaps on the defensive line right now. Zion Branch didn't really factor in, but that was kind of a dart throw, hoping maybe he could surprise some folks and win that safety job back there that Kyron Jones ultimately won. And then Bo Hewley, last pick, he has been sort of the swing tackle guy that stepped in at times, but not really a starter right now. Got some other guys he's fighting. So I'll kind of leave this open. Who do we think won this draft? And I'll go first, and I'm going to give it to Ben. I think that Ben, he's got a few misses, but I think we all do. But with what he's got, with Delp, with Xavier McLeod, Josh McCray, I'm going to give Ben the tip of the cap. I think he beat me and Kipp on this one.
It depends how you look at it. I mean, as I went down the list, other than Daniel Harris and Isaiah Gibson, I don't really have any misses, I wouldn't say, but those are, I mean, Isaiah Gibson hasn't played this season, and Daniel Harris, I would say at this juncture would be considered a miss. I mean, I thought, the more I looked at Kipp's, his last 3 picks were probably the best 3 value picks of the entire draft. Getting Aguero, Lucky, and Cole that late is kind of crazy. And Corey Thomas now, for that matter, you throw him in, probably assuming the Kyron Jones role. So, I think there's still a story to be told about how this thing shakes out by the end of the season. I will say I am playing the game of what the field could have been. The Fields team, I'm not saying it would have won, but I mean, Chauncey Bowens at running back at the value that you would have been getting it at would have been crazy. You could have got London Humphreys at wide receiver. He has one of the biggest plays of the season. Dontrell Glover, none of us would have picked him, but it would have been the all-time, you won the draft pick just with the foresight that you had there. I mean, Kyron Jones goes undrafted, and he's been the starting safety for the entire season. DeMello Jones is the guy that goes undrafted. He's someone that, could have been picked as well. I mean, there would have been some, like, offensive linemen too, would have probably been Michael Uni, Justin Williams at linebacker, maybe Chris Jones outside linebacker. But, the Fields team wasn't too bad either, which I don't know what that says about any of us.
Kipp, what do you think as far as who you think won this one?
I mean, it's pretty tough. I've got 7 starters on my team. The flashiness isn't there, even though I've got the team leader in receiving yards on my team. But I also don't have the defensive MVP on my team. And so, I think overall, Ben's team's probably set up better for the second half as well, with some of the guys that I think should be playing important roles for Georgia. I don't know what the upside of my team is there. I think we've kind of already seen, what we're going to see from most of the players. So, looking forward, I think it's gonna take some guys kind of getting better during this bye week. I think my team can handle it. They can handle this adversity of not being the clear winner in the first half. But I also think that there probably isn't a clear winner in the first half, and I think that kind of says a lot about where this Georgia team is right now. I just think you can make the argument that I don't know that Jordan's team's not getting enough love with the fact that first half, where is his team without Colby Young? Where is his team, without Dylan Bell? I think it's tough to really pin a clear winner right now. That's my argument. I think keep voting, guys. Keep voting. Don't stop the vote. Well,
and looking at Jordan's team, like, we're talking about guys that could step up the second half of the season and where Georgia might need some help. Like Elo Mendoza is, if he can get some pass rush for Georgia the second half of the season, that could change the way we look at that pick. Like Zion Branch, Georgia needs to figure out answers at safety. If KJ Bolden or Ja'Cory Thomas goes down at this point in the season, which is not something that we can just say isn't going to happen. Like if they go down, and you're really clawing for answers. Like I think Adrian Maddox is probably next up, but Zion Branch might get some opportunities. And all that to say, it's like Jordan is that much away from not having a single miss on his entire team. If Elo steps up second half, if there's an injury and Zion Branch has to start playing more, like you kind of then end up having a team full of guys that have to have an impact the second half of the year.
That's why we play 4 quarters of football, gentlemen. All right, final question. And I'll start with this one so you guys can be thinking about this, because this was basically our mid-season podcast. Georgia's got 5 games left on its schedule. Play Florida in Jacksonville, at Mississippi State, host Texas, host Charlotte, at Georgia Tech. So that is 5 games. What is Georgia's record in the final 5 games of the regular season? And man, I have been going back and forth. I'll start this. And I'm going to say Georgia goes 4-1. I think that they lose one more game. They end the year 10-2. And man, I already know nobody wants to hear this. I think Georgia Tech beats Georgia on Black Friday in Mercedes-Benz Stadium. Georgia's still going to be able to make the playoff. But I'm convinced this Georgia Tech team is still pissed about the game last November in Athens. I think Georgia finds a way to beat Florida. I think Florida's defense will be really good, but it's not going to be able to do enough on offense. They'll handle Mississippi State on the road. Texas, I think, will be super close. They'll blow out Charlotte, and I think that Georgia Tech gets revenge. Haynes King walks off the field a winner, but Georgia ends the year 10-2, and I think still very much in the playoff hunt. Ben, what do you think? 5 games left in the regular season. What's their record? How do you see the rest of the regular season play?
Yeah, I looked at those last 5 games. I could be wrong here, but I didn't see Alabama as any one of those 5 teams on the schedule. So I'm going to, until I see, I realize we saw Ole Miss do it last year. We saw Notre Dame in the playoff do it last year, but I think I've reached the point with this Georgia team. I've got to imagine they're going to be better in the first half defensively eventually, right? Like there's no way what we've seen is just what they do every single week, right? I mean, I could be wrong there, but my thinking is you get 2 weeks to figure some things out. Florida is going to present some challenges because they have a new coaching staff and who knows, they can play free and nothing to lose, whatever. They're also going to deal with their own fair share of communication challenges with how they're doing offensive play calling now and who does what and how they communicate what. Like, I think Georgia's going to probably get a little bit of help there just because it's going to be the first time that they're all trying to make that work. Mississippi State, I think, is one that people have just sort of said, oh, Mississippi State, whatever. They're a better football team than they have been. They still aren't winning SEC games, so they're not going to win an SEC game against Georgia. But it's not a fun place to play. It's sort of like an Auburn, going on the road to Auburn. It's just weird things happen. You always have to work harder than you want to win that one, but I think they do. I just don't buy Texas's ability to get into any kind of shootout with Georgia. Not to say that Georgia is going to be able to load up on points against Texas's defense, but I trust Gunnar Stockton over Arch Manning, and when it comes down to it, and that one. And then I hear what you're saying. Georgia Tech is probably pissed about how that one went. I bet you Kirby Smart's pissed that he had to go to 8 overtimes to beat Georgia Tech as well. So they're a good football team. Haynes King does a lot of things well that gives Georgia problems. I just think that's another one Georgia finds a way to win. And even though this isn't a pretty football team, even these games that I just mentioned that I think they're going to go 5-0 in, I don't think any of them are going to be pretty. but I think Georgia finds a way to go 11-1. And assuming A&M drops one, I think they'll get their rematch against Alabama and Atlanta.
All right, Kip, what do you got? Final 5 games of the regular season. How do you see it playing out for Georgia?
I mean, I think they're going 5-0. I look at this schedule. They've already played the top 3 offenses they're going to face this season, I believe. I mean, I just think that, again, Alabama, Ole Miss, and also Tennessee, none of these teams are going to be putting points on the board and playing as efficiently offensively as those teams are. They're also just not going to be catching Georgia. Like, they're not going to have a bye week that Georgia doesn't have. They're not going to have that extra week to prepare for Georgia either. And I think, again, that's going to play a role. Yeah, I don't see that in Texas. I haven't seen that in Mississippi State recently. I haven't seen that from Florida. And at the end of the day, like, Georgia Tech hasn't played anybody, man. Like, again, I get it. But I mean, that Clemson team has been exposed. It's not like that's your big win, and it's just not the win that we thought it was. And Wake Forest, Virginia Tech. I mean, yeah, the Duke win is probably more impressive to me than the Clemson win at this point. But I still watched Duke self-destruct to start that game. Like, special teams was an abomination from them, and probably is the difference in that football game. So that was a losable game for you against Duke. And I also just have to remember that, like, you sold your soul to the play Mercedes-Benz Stadium. And I think that's going to play a role as well. I think Georgia's going to show up there. They already, I mean, like, it's an away game, but it's never like really been a game where we're talking about, like, man, like, like Georgia Tech's like the fans there just don't have the numbers in that stadium. And I think it's going to be even more so at Mercedes-Benz. If they have, if they're like coming into this game at 10-1, and let's just say Georgia Tech is coming into the game also, if we're talking about a top 10, top 5 matchup, the Georgia fans are going to show up to that game. It's going to be an experience for them. They're going to make sure that they get more than their allotment of tickets. And I just think that that's a situation where, I think Georgia makes a statement in that game and goes into, I think it's better for them if they're not playing in Atlanta. We just saw the teams of the bye last year, lose. You're never going to see Kirby, and I don't think Georgia fans should ever not want to play in the SEC championship. You should always want to win that game. It should mean something. But I think either way, whether or not Texas A&M loses, I think it's going to be a good thing for Georgia to finish the season 11-1.
All right, we're going to wrap up the episode right there. Thanks to Kipp and Ben for popping on. Thanks everyone who watched this live, everyone who is watching or listening to it after the fact. Please go subscribe to dogs247.com. We're in the thick of football season. Basketball season's less than a month away. Baseball scrimmages are going all week. Olivia Sayer's been out there and doing a fantastic job covering that for us. Go subscribe to the Junkyard Dawgcast where we get your podcast. Please rate and review. Helps us out tremendously. Go to our YouTube, Dogs247. Go to the TikTok. Lots of good content there. And before you know it, guys, we'll be in Florida week. We'll be previewing that game a little bit later on next week. We'll have on Swamp 24/7's Graham Hall to help us learn about a new look Florida team with a new head coach and getting ready for what I think will be a fun one in Jacksonville. So we'll end the episode right there. For Kipp Adams and Ben Wolk, I'm Jordan Hill. Until next time.